So in today's hunt series video, this is going to be hunt series number 3. I want to talk about perpendicular and parallel access to your tree stands or to your ground blinds, wherever you're going to sit hunting white-tailed deer. And I just kind of made this term up, perpendicular and parallel access, because when I want to refer to perpendicular or parallel, it's just easy. It's just a one-word way to describe what I'm talking about. And after I talk here for a little bit, I got 2 videos where I go on Google Earth and I kind of outline this for you, and I think that's probably the better half of this video, so you really get a good understanding of what I'm talking about. But I want to talk about perpendicular and parallel access to your stands in the context of my goals. So my goals are to attract and hold and grow big bucks on my properties, either the farms that I own or my permission farms. And the way I do that, or one of the ways I do that, is by hunting my properties with the least amount of hunting pressure that I can. So you can not use these concepts and just basically take everything I'm saying right now and throw it away if you don't care about attracting and holding bucks on your property so that you can grow them to 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and if you don't really care about putting a lot of hunting pressure on your land, then these 2 concepts won't really matter to you. But what I have found over the years is my best stands, in terms of being able to hunt them multiple times throughout the year, and when I say multiple, in some cases 7, 8, 9 times a year, and then kill a mature big buck on the 10th sit, the stands that I'm able to do that have perpendicular access. And what I mean by that is when I approach my property, I'm able to walk straight in to that stand with the wind in my face, climb up that tree stand, in the example of a tree stand, hunt with the wind in my face, all the deer are in front of me, and at the end of legal shooting, or if it's a morning hunt and I'm getting down, let's say at 11 or 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, I'm able to back right out from that stand. So that's perpendicular access. I have some what I call parallel access stands. And what I would say about those tree stands is the likelihood of me hunting a parallel access stand over and over and over again throughout the season and not burning that farm out, or at least that location, is very, very slim. So a parallel access stand is one where I'm required to walk parallel. I'm required to, let's say, walk a, darn fly, I'm required to walk a property boundary for a long way and then cut into a stand. So I'm really walking a long cover for a long ways. As opposed to my perpendicular spots, I'm able to walk through maybe a neighboring farm or a cow pasture, a big CRP chunk where deer are not in at the time, and I'm able to walk through where deer are not going to spend any time or very limited amount of time while I get to my stand. So that's perpendicular versus parallel access. I think it's important to think about parallel access to your stands in comparison to perpendicular. And there are strategies to lower the amount of hunting pressure you're putting on your farm, even if you're required to use parallel access, like making sure your access routes are cleaned out, they're brush hogged. I've seen guys use a leaf blower. In the past, I've raked mine, raked all the leaves off, maybe doing parallel hinge cutting. So as you're walking in along that parallel access, you have trees that are hinge cut along there to block your view. So there's strategies that you can use, but I have never, I don't like to use the word never or always, but I have never found that those strategies are as good as using perpendicular access when I'm able to walk straight in, maybe cross a fence line and go right up into my tree, for example. Perpendicular access is always the best. I'll make one last point here before we get into the second half of the video, and that is I will sacrifice not being able to hunt an entire farm, or being able to hunt only half a farm, or in an extreme example, 25 years ago, I actually had a phenomenal farm that I had access to, and I gave it up. I just didn't hunt there anymore. It was a lease, and I gave up the lease because the access was so poor it was all parallel access. We were required to drive in through an easement, and where we parked the truck was actually at Destination Food, which is awful. And then every stand that we had required us to walk down a long length of fence line and then cut in. Every stand, in other words, was parallel access. And that farm every year got burned out very quickly. And it did take us maybe a year or two to figure this out, that there really was never going to be a good way to hunt that farm, so we gave it up. On farms that I own or farms that I have permission to hunt, learning from those I guess the example that I gave you and others, I've found that I'm better off if the backside of the farm or if the center of the farm requires very intrusive access. I'm better off to not even hunt it. Just leave it alone. Hunt the access, the good access that I have. So let's say I have perpendicular access to two halves of a square 40, for example, just to illustrate, just to make it an easy illustration. I won't even hunt the other two edges, or I won't even access the other two edges or the other half of the farm if my access is only parallel access, or if I'm required to walk down an entire fence line and then cut around to get to the back side. I'll just give that up. So that's something to think about. If you want to keep low pressure on your property so that you can attract and hold and grow bucks to their next age class. So with that, let's get into these two Google Earth videos, and these are real examples of two farms that Amy and I hunt and how we use access, perpendicular compared to parallel access, to make these stand sites the best that they can be.
So the best way to describe a perpendicular access compared to a parallel access is to give you a real life example using Google Earth. So I kind of set the stage here on one of my farms. There's a steep ditch shown by that white line there, and I've made a high ditch crossing where I basically leveled out the dirt, and the deer like to cross high, which is where that red line is. So I'm not really going to get into the whole why I use ditch crossings or whatever. This is all about access to this stand. So that steep ditch really funnels deer either high or low. And this is the high ditch crossing. You can see the low ditch crossing is in the center of the timber. And I don't have a stand there because it's too intrusive, bumping way too many deer to get into there. So on this high ditch crossing, I can hunt the stand location with a north wind. So let me just first start out by drawing in what would be coming from the home. I could come cross a couple ditches, go down this fence line, and into the stand. So let's just make the access blue for now. So you can see that would be an example of parallel access. I'm walking through my timber, I'm crossing a couple ditches, walking the fence line, and then I get into my stand. The problem here is I've just walked, almost a quarter mile, maybe not quite, to get to that stand through cover. Deer could be bedded there. They could see me, hear me. So that's what I would consider parallel access, and that's poor access. That's not ideal. And of course, there's strategies. You can hinge cut trees parallel to your access, and you can clear the trail out and use a blower or a rake to keep the leaves off your access. There's all these things you can do, but parallel access is not ideal. So I'm just going to leave that there, and I'm going to draw in what I would consider perpendicular access. So perpendicular access would be coming from my home, going down the road, walking in through this cow pasture, and coming straight in, crossing the fence line, and then into my stand. So there you can see what I would consider perpendicular access, using that cow pasture to access that same stand. And you can go out as far as you think you need to. I just drew it in here, a few hundred yards away from the timber. But your last couple hundred yards, you're walking with the wind in your face. I would hunt this with a north wind. I'd walk straight into the fence line, cross the fence line, and into my tree stand. That would be perpendicular access. So that would be much preferred. Now let's say you did not have access to that cow pasture. Then what I would say is don't use the high ditch crossing at this location. Maybe put in a fence. So let me just draw something in here just for an example. There's another ditch that runs through here. But if there wasn't, so there I just drew another white line in there. So let's say there wasn't another ditch and you wanted to somehow funnel deer past your stand. Then what I would say is build a fence, use hinge cuts, use something other to make structure, and abandon that high ditch crossing way across on the other farm. If your only access is parallel access, that way you can hang another tree stand much closer to home. I'll just put that in here. And I'll mark that the secondary stand. That way, when you're coming in from your home, you have a much shorter parallel access. So there I just drew that in. So just keep that in mind. When you're using parallel access, keep it to a minimum. Keep your trails in short. Try to avoid parallel access through, a half a mile or an eighth of a mile or these long stretches to get to the backside of your property. Put your stands closer, and then you might have to abandon some of your stands that are on the backside of your property if it requires you to use these long stretches of parallel access. So this is an example of another farm that Amy and I have permission to hunt. Mostly open tillable ground is what we have access to hunt. And you can see what I have outlined in yellow is the property in the very southwest part of the farm. I'm guessing there's like 20 acres of some cedars, honey locusts, just kind of some cover, growed up. It's basically growed up cow pasture from years back. So when you first take this on and you start scouting it like we did in person, you'll find, and I'm just going to circle this, that down in here, I'm going to make a big circle here, as best I can anyway. In this like green area that I just circled, that's what you'd call like the honey hole. That's where all the deer sign is. That's where the trails are, the scrapes, the rubs. So the first thought is, you want to get down in there. But there's no way to do it. There's really no way to get down in there and hunt. Again, I'll switch back to blue here. I just start drawing. You can see our access only is from the northeast corner from the road. To get down in that green area, you're walking down this fence line, and once you get about to this inside corner, now how do you hunt this? What wind are you going in there with? How do you get into that green area? If you got a south wind, your wind is blowing in basically what we're hunting. If it's a north wind, it's blowing in on the neighbors, so you're probably bumping deer. So really, how do you get in there? It's terrible access, and that would be an example, again, of parallel access to get it down into that honey hole area. So that's not an option really. The other would be to come all the way from the north and down this fence line, but you run into the same problem. You could probably get into, somewhere about right here with a south wind ish. But again, you're going to have deer crossing behind you. It's just not ideal. Again, you're looking at parallel access. So you're much better off, and I'm just going to use a different color here so it stands out a little better. Let's pick like a brighter teal or something. You're much better off in this example to come in from the road, same access, and stopping right in this area. I'll draw a little right in that area and hang a stand. You're hunting that inside corner. You've used basically perpendicular access to that farm, and you're stopping on the edge. Maybe you can come in in one of these draws. So you can drive in, come down this edge, and pop in here and hunt if that works out for you. So most hunters, I think, are tempted to try and walk in to where that lime green, honey hole, really hot spot area is. And maybe you can get away with it. If you have 10 farms, 1,000 acres and 10 farms spread out all over the place, you can probably go in there and hunt once or twice and then just move to one of your other farms. But most people don't have that. So I would suggest, staying out of those areas and using perpendicular access. And as soon as you hit cover, as soon as you hit deer sign, just stop, even if it's not the best, and play that, what I call the slow play. And eventually you'll get a shot at a nice buck. And then use the other strategies that I've talked about in my other videos about building fence or structure or ditch crossings to get the deer to come up towards you where your access is better. Maybe you come around from this side, come in so far, you come in perpendicular access and you stop right there. That'd be another example. So don't go all the way into the timber. Stop right here. Let me just draw this in real quick for you. Put in a blind, right? And then maybe in this area, you have what I call a transition food plot or a pass-through food plot. That way you can use perpendicular access, stop, hit your blind, get in, have a little food plot in front of you, a pass-through transition plot. The deer come out of the cover, come into your plot, and then they head north. And I can use this as an example because north about where this example would be, where this blind and this little transition plot, about a half a mile is a really nice alfalfa field. So that's where they're going to want to end up. So this would be a pass-through spot where the deer are going to bed. I'll just draw that in real quick. Let's make that red. So the deer are going to bed down in this cover, hopefully make it come through that pass-through transition plot, work this draw out and head, a half a mile north to where they want to be at the end of the night, their destination plot. So that would be an option for you. But I would avoid going down into these, highly attractive. When I say highly attractive, I'm talking about highly attractive for the hunter. If your access is not good, getting right down in the thick of it where all the sign is, because you're really going to burn that property out fast.